thou that sleepest, arise from the dead.
Read the Bible, you'll find out that God's not too happy with what's going on around us.
Redeem the time, because the days are evil.
The Bible has not changed.
Boldly proclaim the restoration and preservation of Christian values in America.
Satan has brainwashed a whole nation.
As goes the church, so goes the nation.
Nobody's convicted of anything anymore.
And now, here's Last Call with your host, B.J. Edwards.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. Politicians are people who, when they see light at the end of the tunnel, go out and buy some more tunnel. Welcome this morning. We have a couple great guests this morning. I'll turn my volume down a little bit here. A couple great guests this morning. Doers, experienced, and you need to align with folks like these. If you care about your family, you better get to know both parties here, because this is just incredible information we're going to be sharing this morning. I don't want to forget about Thanksgiving, but that's kind of the underlying theme about all this. Can you imagine what Thanksgiving is going to be like with Donald Trump, Hitler being president of the United States in January, and they've voted for the anti-Hitler, and they're going to have to sit down and eat with you? Oh, folks, we have to look at that as an opportunity. Don't be yelling. Just let them talk, and then say to them, where did you hear that? And how do you know it's true? Don't forget that. Where did you hear that? And how did you know it's true?
I heard you could save on Christmas shopping if you have these discussions at Thanksgiving.
Really?
Yeah.
Good.
Food for thought.
Food for thought.
Yeah.
Hey, I got to get this out of the road. You're about to listen to 2 hours of opinion and entertainment supplied by Last Call Radio, where you can see the difference. We're not doctors, lawyers, politicians, professional journalists, nor do either of us hold a doctorate degree in anything. Not that that would make any difference, of course, our opinion. We only ask that you, excuse me, as an individual and or corporately, not take our statements or those that we voice from others personal, nor do we recommend that you act on them as if they are facts, although they might very well be just that, facts. But again, our opinion. You're not required to listen to, act on, or repeat anything that you hear today, and that any information or opinion we present is meant for the good of the order and by no means intended to harm or threaten anyone. Yeah, you have to say that. And even saying that, YouTube will go back. We've only been on the air, a decade? They'll go back 20 years and find out something we said and then freeze our program for a week or two, right, Mr. Anderson?
That's true. Yeah. I'm surprised we're still on there. We're broadcasting today.
Oh, my goodness. Wow. Surprise, surprise, surprise.
To all 6 listeners on YouTube.
Yep. Well, yeah. I mean, you expect to see us and then you don't see us. So you don't look for us. It's interesting.
We used to have an audience on YouTube.
Yeah.
We come and go.
And Facebook.
See us on Rumble. On Rumble.
Yep. We were approaching 1,500 plus on our Facebook and YouTube, and that was over 4 years ago. It was 2 weeks prior to the election. No, it was in October. Prior to the 20th November 20th election or November election, and
October surprise, yeah.
They took down our Facebook pages and put us in jail on YouTube. And with regards to Facebook, there was no reason, there was no appeal, just everything was gone.
No warning. No, not
Yep.
We didn't even get a warning ticket.
This is crazy. Hey, look, again, we're gonna gather together as a family, and folks, as goes the family, so goes the nation. Civilization depends on the family. And we're not talking about you being married to a horse or a tree, or your son being a cat and you have to have a box for him. Come on, folks. The best practice historically, psychologists, criminologists, historians will all tell you that the family, the natural family, that's one biologically born man, one biologically born woman in a lifelong committed monogamous relationship with their children, biological or adopted, preferably biological. Sorry. I read some studies on adopted children. My goodness, that was interesting. But the key is that mother and that father, when you take one of them out of the family, you take one of them out, that child spends the rest of their life trying to fill that vacuum that's created. And they'll do anything harsh, alcohol, drugs, gangs. Want to fill that father, right? Gangs, sex, sports, anything and everything to try to fill that vacuum. And to me, divorce is a form of child abuse. We don't recognize it as such. And oh, shudder that I would say that. Again, our opinion, of course, right? My opinion. But when you see what happens when you have children separated from parents, it speaks for itself. I mean, it's just absolutely incredible what we do to children. Hey, we got to get to some headlines. Did you watch the Tyson fight? Jake Paul defeats Mike Tyson. Couldn't find anybody older to fight, I suppose. $20 million to Mike. $20 million to Mike Tyson for that fight. Now, strangely enough, and why we haven't heard a lot from Kamala since the election is because I understand she's in training. They've got a $20 million debt, does the Democratic Party, for the presidential candidacy. And Kamala Harris has agreed to fight Jake Paul for $20 million. I think that's a good thing, right?
That's a good way to make up a debt.
Yeah. Could you have brain fog? Go ahead.
It won't hurt her brain any, I think.
Speaking of brain, I've got a notation here about brain fog. How do you tell what to do when you have brain fog? And the first question you need to ask is, who did you vote for in November? Right?
There you go.
As ye sow, so shall ye reap. Wow. Or as I like to say, if you put yourself in a position where something bad can happen, something bad probably will happen. If you continue to do it, something bad definitely will happen. Ukraine uses U.S. supplied long-range missiles deep in Russian territory. I hope Donald Trump is talking to Putin, although I don't think he's supposed to. Go ahead.
Yeah, there's some kind of law where he can't negotiate behind the current president's back. Yep. But somebody is, because the current president doesn't know where he is.
Rumor has it. Texas Congressman Keith Self has written articles of impeachment for Biden over this, sending U.S. made missiles into Russia. Why would they do it right now? Over the past 2 months, they have 2 months to do this. U.S. Senate strikes down legislation for Bernie Sanders blocking arms to Israel. By the way, I don't know whether you're aware of this or not, but in Ukraine, Zelensky refused to hold elections again. Did you know that? And there's a rumor that most Ukrainians oppose the war. Here's a good one. Pentagon, I think they're going after Pete Hegseth, by the way. They're digging up dirt on him. They just can't stand anybody that's not from the deep state, or they won't marry the deep state, aka Donald Trump. They can't get to him directly right now, maybe, I don't know, but they're going after his selections, the ones that aren't deep staters. Hegseth's one of them. With that in mind, the Pentagon can't account for 63% of nearly $4 trillion in assets. Maybe they ought to conduct the audit in Ukraine. Venezuelan gang expands territory to 16 states. and violence is increasing. In unanimous vote, Los Angeles City Council gives themselves sanctuary city status. Again, as you sow, so shall ye reap. Resurgence of tuberculosis in the USA. Huh. Surprise, surprise, surprise. Right, Mr. Anderson?
Got to have those pandemics.
Mm-hmm.
Got to keep people on the edge and sell those vaccines to keep that pharmacy industry going.
On the lighter side, or the brighter side, an ugly civil war is breaking out at MSNBC. When they can't eat you, they'll eat their own, folks. Where did you hear that, and how do you know it's true, right? Remember that Thanksgiving, if you're going to have a discussion and you want to talk to your kids, and kids, you want to talk to your parents who would die for you. They would die for you.
Yeah.
Would Biden die for you? The National Football League, a surprising edit about football players celebrating touchdowns with the Donald Trump dance. The league has no issue. I'd love this. It's up to the network to cover as they see fit. RFK Jr. Go ahead, Mr. Anderson.
It's just silly, you know. What they will bring up, and then they want to ban it for what? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
What side do we agree with? I don't know.
I found this note where the RFK Jr. says we're all involved in a spiritual warfare.
Yeah, I've heard that.
And then Chuck Schumer.
Wait a minute.
This is not just economic warfare. It's not just chemical warfare. We're all involved in spiritual warfare. Over the 20,000.
We're in a spiritual war, folks, but there are physical manifestations.
There are.
That's what you're seeing. God designed a perfect world and perfect natural laws if you pay heed to them. And yeah, you're probably going to have to read the Bible to understand some of them. Yeah. Sorry. The Bible does record natural laws.
Make sure you get the right translation.
Yeah, you have to have that. Otherwise, we might be fighting over what's right. Look at if you want to question a Bible verse or a natural law that you see in the Bible, take a look around you. There's verification proof every day. You can identify as when you walk off a cliff, you can identify as somebody who's not going to go down, but you are, regardless of what you identify as, because that's a spiritual law, physical. I think one of the biggest physical laws, spiritual, is a child needs a mother and a father, which I mentioned earlier. Good spiritual law. Donald Trump offered over 1,400 acres of land to stage deportation operation in Texas. FEMA director, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I was talking to myself. I was going to bring up this one.
I love that. Thank you, Coach Dave. Trump has better coverage than Verizon. Can you hear us now?
Yeah.
Somebody ought to make a T-shirt with that. House Republicans protect women's right in Capitol Hill. Good. What? Senator Roger Marshall, Republican, Kansas, introduces legislation defining men and women. We need that. Why are we paying all this money for an educational system? We need that.
I think we need that.
This one I don't know about, and we'll go to break after this, Mr. Anderson. Fauci beware. Rand Paul to use chairmanship to uncover truth about COVID-19. Folks, there are way too many people that are financially invested in this to ever let the truth get out about COVID-19. We're still giving vaccinations now for COVID-19. Think about that. We're still giving, and think about this. People are actually getting vaccinations for COVID-19.
There's ads on TV,
Mhm.
go
Yep.
get your shot, go get your shot. And I see that they're promoting COVID-19 testing for the holidays. So in case you're
At the front door of the family that's having the dinner.
yeah, there you go. After that long trip you took from one place to another, they're talking about high traffic traveling this holiday, higher than it's been in a long time. And now, you got to get tested before you go. I don't know. It's a crazy, crazy world.
It is. I'll give one more. Science just discovered that some memories don't live in our brains. All study participants were progressive liberals, so you can guess what part of the human anatomy they found most of their mental reserves, and it was below the waist, I think on the backside. Let's take a break.
I don't want to forget our brothers and sisters, our citizens in North Carolina.
Oh man!
And it's cold down there. And look at where they got to live. So don't forget them. Send them some money, whatever you can do. It's a bad situation down there.
Amen.
The stories are relentless.
Hey, we got a great guest coming up. B.J. Edwards along with Mr. Anderson.
Last Call with B.J. Edwards. Real talk about real life.
And we are back. Our first guest this morning is Jeff Morgan. Jeff is from Texas. I can't help but think of Coach Dave Daubenmire when the ACLU invited him into the fight, and they created a conservative monster with that's a nice way. It's a nice monster. And Coach Dave Daubenmire. Well, Texas invited Jeff Morgan into their family court system, and the court system has never been the same since. Why don't you bring Jeff in with us, please? Hey Jeff, love your hat, man. I hope you enjoyed the intro this morning.
Absolutely, I did. The only thing is with this hat here, I thought, I have another hat, but I couldn't find it this morning. It's called "Make the Family Great Again."
Oh yeah.
And, so we can only make America great again if we make the family great again first, because America is comprised of families. And what we have going on right now, we have pure destruction of our families across the entire United States, done in our family codes, which I believe, which I now call the Marxist monstrosities. And I'll be glad to go into that if you would so like me to do so.
Yep. Family anarchy is what we have, folks. Anything goes and anyone goes. You've got children with one parent, mostly female, no male. Look, when you take the male out of the family, a child needs to see that. And you could go to the prison systems and talk to the prisoners there and ask them about their family life, ask them about their life with their father. I'm not going to go off on that, but I could. But you have gay couples, interesting term, that are bringing up children, and those children know the difference between a male and a female, and they need that. But I'm just giving you some examples of what's going on. Go ahead, Jeff. I brought you on because you have a plethora of information with regards to marriage. How were you invited into the battle, Jeff?
Yeah, how was I invited into the battle? When my ex-wife filed a no-fault divorce against me, something that I don't believe ever should have happened. We both had gone to Bible college. We had both had a Christian marriage. In fact, her father was the minister, so-called, who married us, and also was involved in facilitating a divorce because they were going to profit financially from it. I hate to say that, but that's just the way that it is. Anyway, there's nothing you can do to stop the divorce. And they'll tell you that. They have a law firm in Texas that says basically, what can you do to stop a no-fault divorce? I'll tell you nothing. It's on their website. You can do nothing except maybe try to convince your wife. But when you make when you take a covenant to God, when you tell God, I'm planning to, love, hold, forsake each other, whatever, till death do us part. As the Bible says, for this cause a man shall leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife, the two shall become one. And no human should be able to separate them. There are, unfortunately, as we know, reasons for divorce, even biblically speaking, but each divorce is still against the will of God, and it does inflict trauma for the most part on children. We've got to say that each divorce should be mourned, not celebrated, because something has gone askew. But, too often today we have our divorce parties. I mean, how sick and perverse is that? That we have
55% divorce rate, something like that.
So the divorce rate number, that's a hard one to really calculate, because first off, we don't really know. And the methodology behind that, I'm not sure that I agree with it. But the other thing is that we also have a lot of the cohabitation situations, which are not recorded as marriage nor divorces. But, if you cohabit, the likelihood of you getting a divorce in the future actually increases. I believe that's even a couple of states that cohabitation apart from marriage is still a crime, but whatever. There's a lot of things that we could talk about here. So, but go ahead.
The philosophy behind when you are living with somebody else, there is no pressure to continue to do that. It's kind of like no fault divorce. You got one foot in the door and one foot out the door continually.
Right.
And you can leave anytime with no problems. Okay. You don't have to pay for anything. Just leave. And
not just you don't have to pay for anything. You can actually be rewarded.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, no, the divorce system that is, I would say legitimately that the state has an interest in marriage. I just don't know the state's interest in divorce and why they have made it so easy for people to get divorced. They have actually succumbed to Marxist propaganda, Marxist ideology. And BJ, as I was talking about yesterday, and I've talked about it in a different time, if you go back to Plato believed that children should be reared by the state. You want your children to actually be reared by the state because if you're reared by parents, you might be a little bit too selfish, right? You might raise your children not to have the inclusiveness of I'm here for society. And throughout the ages, this is what a lot of socialists have done. They've tried to say, well, you know what, we have to have communal situations. We need to get rid of the family. The state should play a greater role. State should play a greater role in education. We need to reduce family dependency, weaken the traditional patriarchal structure. And these are some of the things, like I said, that I've put down here just by going through different people. Diminish the power of the traditional family, restructure the family, communal child rearing. But Marx and Engels, in their Communist Manifesto, they wanted the abolition of private property. And as a part of that, they also called for the abolition of the family. It's interesting, on page 45 of the Communist Manifesto, it says, do you charge us with wanting to stop the exploitation of children by their parents? To this crime, we plead guilty. And, so in a Marxist perspective, parents are the exploiters of children. And then down here, a little bit further, the bourgeoisie has a wife as a mere instrument of production. He hears that the instruments of production are to be exploited in common, and naturally can come to no other conclusion that the lot of being common to all will likewise fail with women. He even has a suspicion the real point and aim is to do away with the status of women as mere instruments of production. Now, the interesting thing is, when Lenin came to power, Lenin actually took this propaganda, this ideology, this thing that has been going on throughout the ages that runs contrary to the biblical meaning and purpose of marriage. God says that he hates divorce because he wants to see godly offspring. Both the father and the mother are necessary to bring godly offspring into the world. But Lenin did this: 5 ways Lenin's propaganda destroyed marriage and the family in Russia. And what he said was this, that the first all Russian conference of working women in 1918, the success of a revolution depends on how much women take part in it. Well, women didn't want to take part in it. They wanted to care about their families, but he's trying to get the women involved with this. So what did they do? What kind of propaganda did they spread? one of the things, and when I say these things, you're going to say, isn't this America today? Isn't this the Western world today? So even though we've supposedly defeated communism, communism ideology is ingrained in our thought patterns.
Me.
Yeah. Number one, we need to equate marriage with slavery. Marriage is slavery. Marriage should be the greatest blessing and joy that you have. It's something so glorious. Marriage is the place that you have intimate relations with your husband or wife. From these intimate relations come forth children that you get to rear for the glory of God. But marriage is slavery. This is what the Marxists believed. And, one of his feminist lieutenants, Alexandra Kollontai, she was quoted in the Atlantic magazine in 1926, July 1926, in the Russian effort to abolish marriage. She says, we wanted to give the family a good shakeup, and we did. That's what they did. But the propaganda is this: marriage is slavery. And you hear people say this, well, you can't demand that somebody stay married when, basically being enslaved to somebody. This is Marxism. This is Marxism. They had in mind something far more radical. They had it all out, the Leninists, the Marxists, today's commie-crats. They have an all-out war against the family. We need to call it old and outdated. The state always knows better than a family. And they also said something else here, and this comes down to the issue of no-fault divorce. Instead of marriage, they would be more disposable unions of affection and comradeship. Oh, I fell in love. I fell out of love. That falling in love and falling out of love crap is one of the biggest reasons that we have divorce taking place. This is Leninism. This is Marxism. We're going to have unions of affection and comradeship. And yes, that should be present. But the reality of life is that there are times that marriage is tough. And while I don't feel the affection and the comradeship, that's why you're married. That's why you've taken a commitment to God to rough the storms. Once you get married, not everything is smooth sailing. Marriage says, I've made this covenant to God, this commitment to God, and other people to persevere through those times. And very quickly, I'll go through the other areas of propaganda that they had. The sameness, long live the sameness. There's really no difference between men and women. And therefore you'll get the burly Russian woman with a strong neck. And I'm not trying to disparage any of them whatsoever, but you want to create men and women to be the same, like there's no difference between them. And yet now we're fighting the opposite, that we need to kick men out of women's sports. Men and women are not the same. They're not the same physically. They're not the same in their thought patterns. They're not the same spiritually. There is an equality of a certain way. We're all equal before God. But look at, women can bring children into the world. They give life. Men can't do that.
Yep.
That should be the exaltation of women. But we need to somehow say that we're the same. And really, what the commie-crats do today is that they take it one step further and say that women should be superior to men, and men should be their servants. And that's not the way it's supposed to work biblically. The third thing is that it takes a village. You can't rear your children on your own. You need to have a village. So we need to destroy the family and get people that would be more communal minded. Your children belong to the states. And when you look at the family codes, the Texas family codes, which I now call the Marxist monstrosity, because it's Marxism through and through, it subverts our society. What they are saying is that children belong to the state. There's a whole doctrine with regard to this. You parents, the state needs to be involved and tell you how to run your families. It takes, number 4, it takes a community organizer. So when Alexandra Kollontai was dispatched, again, the women didn't really want this stuff, but she had to go out there and she had to agitate for the Communist Party and the propaganda of the new model. They had their own publication, stuff like that. A large number of women lost their families, particularly in the Muslim South, where they were attacked and murdered for divorce, and they rapidly became outcasts. Remember, this was supposed to be liberating, right? Many of these women ended up in brothels. How liberating is that you're ending up in a brothel?
Jeff, we're gonna have to take a break.
Can I, one point real fast?
Go ahead.
Okay, it'll be just right here. And then the final thing is this: whenever it fails, whenever socialism fails, blame the funding. There wasn't enough funding. More funding, we would have made it work.
Like public schools,
like everything, like everything.
Government run schools, yeah. Government run marriages, folks, yeah. Oh yeah, Oh yeah, and that's what they need. That the family is that. I'll get into this after the break. Take us to break, Mr. Anderson. BJ Edwards along, Mr. Anderson. This is your last call. Jeff Morgan, our guest.
Faith, discussion, and so much more. Last Call with BJ Edwards.
And panel, if you want to say something, just unmute yourself and we'll try to get you in. Jeff, you're talking about Plato. I'll call it Platonian marriage, Platonian families. The Brave New World is basically where Plato and our current leaders have us headed.
Right.
It's like I mean, how many children do you think Plato had?
That's a good question. I don't actually know. Did he have any? I don't know.
I bet he didn't. I'll bet he didn't, because once you have a child, everything changes.
Everything changes.
Everything changes.
Yeah. It's interesting.
Go ahead.
Interesting that you mentioned Brave New World. I remember hearing the question, who won out? 1984, Brave New World. Actually, I think both of them have won together, but
yeah.
Brave New World is something that the people need to read. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I need another Soma.
And 1984, I recommend both of those books.
Yes.
The Big Brother, I don't know whether it's out of, I go through the Maslow hierarchy needs. It starts with the basic shelter, et cetera. If you want to know what that means, take a look at North Carolina, Eastern Tennessee. Okay. That's the basics. Okay. And then you get up to where we are in America, where we're Uberized. Anything you want is already made for you. All you need to do is pick up the phone and call. And pretty soon AI is going to do that before you even think about it. I mean, that's the ultimate here, right? And you need to be very careful with that, because when you get to that level, your expectancy is through the roof. And when something doesn't go right, you need a somebody to take care of that for you. And that's where government comes in. Just pay us enough money and we'll take care of all of your needs. We'll bring the family up correctly. Only we know how to bring a family up correctly. You know, I was watching the TV this morning a little bit, and there was an article about a lady who had a 10-year-old son who decided to go off on his own. Well, as a result of that, the police came and arrested her. And I'm going, well, wait a minute. Public schools take a child without the parents' knowledge, change their sex, and that's okay? I mean, is this insane or what? Go ahead, Jeff.
No, it's absolutely insane. It's completely, absolutely insane. Talking about AI, though, my bigger fears are is that what happens when you get to the robots and the robots become a better companion or spouse for you than a natural husband or wife? I don't think it's that far away.
Yeah, that's what men want anyway. Come on, let's be honest here, Jeff.
I'm just saying that, it also, too, what if you had, it can go both ways. Men can want their thing, women can want their thing. So basically, what do you do? I don't know how you reproduce in that environment. We just have surrogacy, and people have talked about surrogacy. I think surrogacy is a horrible example, but a horrible practice. But anyway, that's just my opinion on that. But then, what do you do to propagate the race? Anyway, but it's interesting that you mentioned Pete Hegseth, and I talked with Pete Hegseth off camera one time. Pete Hegseth has gone through the family courts, as has Sean Parnell. Sean Parnell was running for Senate in Pennsylvania against John Fetterman. And the reason he dropped, Sean probably would have won, but the reason he dropped out is because of family court. And he'll talk about these. He's had an interview with Megyn Kelly, other places that we've talked with him about this very issue. Because had he become a senator, they would have taken his kids away because he could not have been a good father. He was a good father. If I recall correctly, his wife wanted divorce, and then all of a sudden now he's fighting to be in his kids' lives and spending, of course, hundreds of thousands of dollars, because the industry is designed to do that, to exploit you, to take your money. Maybe they should be funding this thing that the socialism fails because of lack of funding. Well, go to the family law attorneys and let them fund the stuff that they're actually profiting off of. So anyway, we do have a bill here in Texas right now. I want to go over it very briefly. It's House Bill 931 by Cody Basut. And what it's trying to do in Texas is talk about covenant marriage. Now, I read at the beginning. Yesterday, I gave it a B rating. I think I'm going to actually downgrade it. Sorry, Cody. Cody's a good man. He's a pastor. He's also an attorney. He's been a legislator. This is, I think, his third or fourth term coming up right now. But as I've gone through this bill again, I do have some critiques about it. What he wanted to do is bring covenant marriage in. And this is very important because, BJ, when we get married, if you're a minister, you marry somebody in the name of Jesus Christ. You have certain goals, anticipations. You anticipate that a person is going to be getting married for life because that is the biblical teaching. And if you do go through the Catholic Church, you go through very specific rituals to make it a Catholic marriage. So in my perspective is, if you enter into a religious marriage, except if there is some type of crime being committed, the state should have no involvement within that marriage. Right now, with no fault divorce, the state comes in at any time for any reason. That people can make up a reason, they can lie about a reason, they can divorce you. So as you know, a couple of years ago, I got the Texas Republican platform changed with regard to no fault divorce. It had already asked the legislature to rescind no fault divorce. But because of some of the conversations and discussions I heard, I put in one word, that we should ask the legislature to rescind unilateral no fault divorce. That's forced divorce, divorce against which there is no defense, divorce against which due process is subverted, and divorce that there is a predetermined outcome. You cannot win if you are the respondent to a no fault divorce. That's just the way that it is. So I put that in there, and nobody noticed it at the beginning too much. And then about a year and a half later, all of a sudden people were like going apoplectic, like Texas is trying to get rid of no fault divorce and everything. And there was an article even written in the Swedish newspaper about the whole thing, which I found quite amusing because it passed, but I think it had the minimal. I think we had 85% approval of the GOP anyway, but it is in there. And since then, every convention, the platform plank has been modified and strengthened even further. But so with this bill that Cody has down, and again, Cody's a good man. He would love to get rid of no fault divorce, and he put covenant marriage into place to protect people somewhat that are entering into marriage, or that have a marriage and say, listen, our marriage is devoted to God. What the covenant marriage does, it makes it a little bit harder to get divorced. And as I read through this, I love the idea because the covenant marriages do exist. Personally, I believe that no pastor should ever perform a state marriage because what you are doing when you do that, you're giving the couple over to the state. The state is set because state law actually dictates when and how they can get divorced. And the issue is not the marriage issue. The issue is the divorce issue. We need to attack the divorce law. Like I said, the state has a legitimate interest in marriage. The state does not have a legitimate interest, in my opinion, in divorce. And they create destruction and they create trauma, generational trauma when they do this. Anyway, with regard to this bill, House Bill 931, I would support it, but I also think that it's a half measure at this point, from my perspective. One of the things that says that you can either enter or have your marriage changed to a covenant marriage. We do solemnly declare that marriage is a covenant between two people who agree to live together as spouses for as long as both may live. We understand the nature, purpose, and responsibilities of marriage and have received counseling on the obligations of covenant marriage. We understand that a covenant marriage is for life. We understand that we can get divorced or separated. If we experience marital difficulties, we commit ourselves to take all reasonable efforts to preserve our marriage, including marital counseling. With full knowledge of what this commitment means, we declare our intent to enter into a covenant marriage that will be bound by Texas law on covenant marriage, and we promise to love, honor, and care for one another for the rest of our lives. Now, to me, this is already what you should be doing in marriage, right? When you get married, you're supposed to be pledging, because I know when I took my vow, love, honor, cherish your wife till death do us part. So I'm like, okay, so we already have this in here. What really did it add? The only thing that I can see is that it's added a counseling requirement. And I think that in that sense, the bill's a little bit weak. Well, it's more than a little bit weak, but because again, by definition, marriage counseling is great if you get the right counselors. They've said that a lot of times the result of the counseling depends upon the orientation of the counselor. If the counselor says, well, you could get divorced, that may lead that way, unless you go to somebody who says, no, you can't get divorced. Fix it.
I think Norm Davis has a comment or two. Norm, he's one of our panelists. Go ahead, Norm.
Thank you. Brother Jeff, thanks for what you're doing. You know, as an old counselor, so many marriages, they divorce because of the way they feel toward one another. And, you know, men would come into me and say, well, I don't love her anymore. I say, I don't care.
Yeah, exactly.
That's not the issue. You're commanded to love her. And the reason that you don't have the feelings is you quit doing the things that the Bible says love is.
Yeah.
When you start being kind and considerate and putting her first, the feelings we get from love, I think, is just a benefit. It's a blessing of applying God's principles in the marriage. So, you know, I didn't care how they felt about one another because I knew what had happened. You know, they got distracted, you know, with jobs and careers and kids, and they quit meeting one another's needs. Therefore, the feelings left. So we just got to, again, get back to what we were doing, because love will never hold a marriage together. It's a commitment. Commitment's going to hold the love together. So, if I could get people to see that, we had some pretty good success in saving marriages. So,
I think that one of the problems we have is monogamy, because we live in a society where if it feels good, do it.
Right.
And when you lie with a woman or lie with a man, and it's the first time, something happens. It is an incredible bond is formed, and the more monogamous you are before you get married, the less likely that you're going to have a divorce. And what you're talking about, the love thing, there's just an attachment there that you don't understand, but it is there. Now, when we talk about, you know, lifelong committed monogamous relationship, that's during the marriage. That isn't just during the marriage. It's preferred as pre. Now, if you haven't been monogamous, should you not get married? No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that a best practice is monogamy before marriage.
Right.
And if you took studies, I think you would be stunned at the results with regards to who gets divorced and who doesn't get divorced on that one item alone. But Norm, what do you think?
I agree.
I was going to say that, you know, some of the women are talking about this right now, this thing called pair bonding or something like that after a certain number of partners, and they're talking to other women saying, look, if you do this, you cannot bond with your partner the way you should be able to. There may be a different mechanism with men. I don't know. I'm not a person who studied this and everything, but I still also agree that the idea that, you know, partnering with somebody else does create difficulties, whether it's memories, whether it's the pair bonding thing, or whatever. And Norm, what you said, love is a choice.
Right.
You know, I remember that one book that Frank Murneth wrote. And yes, abstinence is a biblical teaching. Abstinence before marriage. Now, I will also say too that in the Old Testament there were a number of people that had polygamous marriages. Or if you look at some of the stuff, you're like, how do you reconcile this with, you know, New Testament teaching and God's purpose? I don't know exactly how you reconcile everything, except to say that people are sinners and whatever. But yes, it's God's intent that one man and one woman marry and are faithful to each other for life. The idea of marriage, though, sex outside of marriage is fornication for sure. And if sex outside of marriage is adultery. And what the interesting thing is, people forget is that there are still 21 states, I believe, in America that actually adultery is a crime. You know, 5 states, to the best of my knowledge, that adultery is a felony. Now, is any of this enforced? No. In Texas, we have gotten rid of that. We're too progressive for that. I think it's because our legislators would have to get themselves disqualified from office. We know that there are judges, there's family law attorneys that are involved in swinging and stuff like that. And or judges that are homosexual or lesbian, or, you know, all sorts of different things. So right away, you know that they are not in line with your values. We're allowing people not in line with your values to make determinations on what's in the best interest of your children. That's nonsense. BJ, I don't know when you have the next break coming up, but I'd like to talk a little bit more about this and the best interest of the child. I just didn't want to run it if you're running into a hard break here.
In about 30 seconds, we're due for a break. So yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll say real quickly then, the interesting thing about the best interest of the child, nobody knows what it means. A couple of months ago, our legislature is finally trying to say, well, maybe we should define what the best interest of the child is. But the best interest of the child is exclusively a stranger will tell you what's best for your children. A stranger who does not know your children. And they get to make that determination. And two people may have two different ideas of what that means. The whole thing is just, it's a mess.
You need to get into that natural law thing like I keep talking about. We don't consider that. We try to ignore it. Well, wait a minute. Whoa. That sounds biblical. Nope. Separation of church and state. We can't have anything that makes sense that is found in the Bible. We just can't have that.
Then keep the state out of marriage, because marriage, even by Texas jurisprudence, is ordained by God, an institution of God. I could go into that too, and because that's what I think the big issue is.
I get it. Jeff Morgan, he's kind of quiet. You have to prompt him to say things. So we'll keep working on him after the break. BJ Edwards along, Mr. Anderson. This is your last call, folks.
Last call with BJ Edwards. Real talk about real life.
So, Jeff, do you have a life? I mean, it sounds like you do. All you do is this court thing and study laws. Come on, man. Do you have a life at all?
Well, I felt like this last year I've had to pull back just because it was starting to impact me, because I just had to get my health back, as it was draining me a lot of times. But yeah, so I do have a life. But BJ, we have an opportunity right now that we would not have had the other side won the national election. And we got a lot of good people in Texas here as well. But the thing is that a lot of these people, like I said, even Cody, great guy, but some of the stuff that he's put into this bill, he's still saying the state gets to determine what these things are. And that's the crux of the issue. And he said, like, if two people decide to get divorced, they have to do so under insupportability, which is 6.001 of the Marxist monstrosity, also known as the Texas Family Code. And that 6.001 is the issue, because insupportability is not defined. And there's a whole court case on this issue of what is the legitimate ends of the marital relationship. This took place in 2021. Justice Kim Thompson Frost wrote a dissent to in the three-person panel about no-fault divorce. Article 1, Section 6, and by the way, our Marxist monstrosity, 1,633 pages, not once is the word God mentioned. So I can definitively say it is a godless doctrine. It is a godless document. In our Texas Constitution, God is mentioned 4 times in the preamble, and also in Article 1, Section 6, where it says, all men have a natural and indefeasible right to worship Almighty God according to the dictates of their own consciences. No man shall be compelled to attend, erect, or support any place of worship, or to maintain any ministry against his consent. No human authority ought. This is mandatory. No human authority is allowed to, in any case, whatever, to control or interfere with the rights of conscience in matters of religion. And no preference shall ever be given by law to any religious society or mode of worship. But it shall be the duty of the legislature to pass such laws as may be necessary to protect equally every religious denomination in the peaceable enjoyment of its own mode of public worship. It was based on Article 1, Section 6 of our Texas Constitution that Justice Kim Thompson Frost said, no fault divorce, the statute 6.001 is unconstitutional. Because how do you define the legitimate ends of the marital relationships? It's like Christmas. How do we define Christmas? For Christmas, we say, and I don't want to get into this. Well, one was Jesus really born. We celebrate the birth of our Savior, Jesus Christ, into the world. The beginning of God intervening in the person of Jesus Christ to save us from our sins. That's what we celebrate. Other people celebrate Santa Claus and Frosty the Snowman and Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer and stuff like that. So there are 2 legitimate ends for them. One is we worship Jesus Christ. The other one is that we just celebrate. We have the Yuletide and everything else. And then in many people, they have a combination of both. They have both the religious and the secular, because we live in that type of a society. But the interesting thing is that when it comes down to issues in the matters of religion, the state is not allowed to intervene in those issues. And Texas jurisprudence says that marriage is an institution by God. For generations, courts have vigorously safeguarded the institution of marriage for the good of society. For generations, our state courts have characterized marriage as a divine institution with sacred status and sacred rights, an institution and status ordained by God and not originated by human law. Marriage was not originated by human law. It is a status ordained by God, the foundation and support of good government, and absolutely necessary to the purity and preservation of good society. Marriage is a sacred institution. So why is the state allowed to destroy marriages? If you want to get a secular marriage, fine, get a secular marriage. In fact, I even made the proposal to the legislature. You could have temporary marriages. They do this in Muslim countries, at least in one sect of Islam, because I said, well, you can't have sex outside of marriage. So they created the mutta marriage, which would be like, I could marry her for 3 days. It was mutually agreed marriage for 3 days so they could have sex with each other. Because maybe you're out and you're fighting a war, and man, you just have to have something, but you can't get home to see your wife, so you can have a temporary marriage. And of course, you're allowed to have multiple marriages in Islam. But these are the shenanigans. This is the way that people play the game. And I simply said, we could have temporary marriages. You could issue a 1-year marriage license. This would be your trial marriage. And then people could say, well, hey, you know what? We want to renew our 1-year marriage license or a 5-year marriage license. But BJ, would you commit to having a family knowing that you just had a 1-year marriage? You would not. You commit to a family, to bringing children into the world, because marriage is supposed to be a sacred institution that is safeguarded and that should be protected. And that when you have children as a Christian person, part of your duty is to see your children reared for the glory of God. God wants families intact for strong children. Not saying that people that come from divorced families cannot be men and women of God. Not saying that at all. But the purpose of God is that a man and a woman come together and they rear godly offspring. And that's in the book of Malachi. And when you look at what Jesus talked about marriage, it's reflected here. No human authority ought to be doing this. And I don't care if you're a judge. I don't care if you're a divorce attorney advocating it. I don't care what it is. Forced divorce is pure communism. The Marxist propaganda has influenced our Texas family code, our Marxist monstrosity. And the way that you weaken a society, you do two things. Number one, well, maybe not in this order, but you weaken the church. When you declare that marriage is a civil institution, as Lenin did, what he did, he took the rights of marriage from the church and he gave it to the state. He weakened the authority of the church at that point. Years ago, it used to be that when people got married, it would be done by a minister. They announce it to the church. And, is there any reason that these people should not get married? No. Good. Then after a certain amount of time, then they would marry them. It was a private matter, and they would write it in the Bible that they so-and-so and so-and-so were married on such a date. If you want to send that into the state, because there are other issues, yes, that's all that you need. And in fact, Alabama has gotten rid of the marriage license. You do not need a license for a fundamental right. And the interesting thing is that even under Obergefell v. Hodges, that's the so-called legalized gay marriage throughout the states, marriage is a fundamental right. That's what it says. Why do you need a license for a fundamental right? But in addition to weakening the church, they have now destroyed the family. And as Lenin used to say, destroy the family, destroy society. When you destroy the family, when you get rid of the two-person there, a man contributes something, a woman contributes something. Together, they create more than what either one of them could individually. A man and a woman, not two women, not two men. Sometimes those situations occur. But God's ideal, what his will is for us is a man and a woman rearing children together for the glory of God. And the state should have no authority unless there's something criminal that's going on. I mean, you might say the first thing is, well, what about domestic abuse? Well, the thing is, domestic abuse lets people get away with it. It does.
Where's the patriarchs in the family? Folks, you're listening to Jeff Morgan from Texas. Jeff, we're going to have to take a break here in about 5 minutes, and we have a great couple coming on the second hour. You're welcome to stay with us and make some comments if you'd like to. The McNeeses and
McNees are great people. Love them.
Yeah, they are. And something's coming up in Ohio that we're just not aware of. We're so focused on this and that and the other, and when it comes to the family, we just kind of get like, well, okay, but I'm busy over here first. I got to take care of this. I got to take care of that. We got to make sure that the president gets in there okay, and we get the right people in office. Yada yada yada. We are so dependent on our government, and that's what's led us to where we are today. I talk about government-run schools. They teach 4 things, one of which is man, not God, is the measure of all things, and that's what we've been explaining this morning. We have man taking over, what God gave us, and without using the Bible as an instruction manual, we're just going to do it ourselves. And our nature and our fallibility is really, really costing, children more than any other children problems. The children that we have today, the suicide rate, as I understand it, is going up. Surprise, surprise. And I wonder if public schools, if that would be any difference, it'd be more or less. I just wonder.
So it's not just the family problems, it's societal problems. And it was interesting. I talked with one person who said this, when you see kids at school and they're being impacted because their parents are going through divorce, and they find out that, so they talk about this, and then they're like, well, what happens if my parents do this? And you're creating a trauma in the entire grade. So what's happened in the entire classroom, and it's making them that they can't learn as readily as they could. And I mean, so they can't learn, and maybe in some respects, if they're talking about morality, that might be a good thing, except that they have nothing to work with. I remember talking with Trevor Loud, and he said, Jeff, you never know, because back in the older time, people don't know that Stalin had to start changing what was going on in communist society because it was so bad. He started to restrict divorce. You had to justify divorce. I mean, if only we had that wisdom of a Stalin. And I hate to say this because Stalin is a terrible dictator and everything, but it was so bad. But he said, Jeff, they didn't have any raw material to work with because they destroyed the family. And maybe the pendulum will swing so far that people are going to say we have to start addressing this. And BJ, what I've seen, this is my opinion, and I've talked with a number of people about this, this issue is becoming more and more prevalent and prominent in thinking. Maybe it is our time to strike. We must restore the family if we are going to make America great again.
Amen. We're going to have to go to break. Jeff, hang in there with us if you'd like. We're going to bring the McNeeses on. Mr. Anderson, take us to break. And when we get back, we'll have the McNeeses from Ohio on. Incredible couple.
This is a war that should have never happened. It's a war the Russians tried repeatedly to settle on terms that were very, very beneficial to Ukraine and us. The major thing they wanted was for us to keep NATO out of the Ukraine. The big military contractors want to add new countries to NATO all the time. Why? Because then that country has to conform its military purchases to NATO weapon specifications, which means certain companies, Northrop Grumman, Raytheon, General Dynamics, Boeing, and Lockheed, get a trapped market. In March of 2022, we committed $113 billion. Just to give you an example, we could have built a home for almost every homeless person in this country. We then committed another $24 billion since then, 2 months ago, and now President Biden's asking for another $60 billion. But the big expenses are going to come after the war, when we have to rebuild all the things that we destroyed. Mitch McConnell was asked, can we really afford to spend $113 billion to Ukraine? He said, don't worry. It's not really going to Ukraine.
It's going to American defense manufacturers.
So he just admitted it's a money laundering scheme. And who do you think owns every one of those companies? BlackRock. So Tim Scott, during the Republican debate, said, don't worry, it's not a gift to Ukraine, it's a loan. So raise your hand if you think that that loan's ever getting paid back. Yeah, of course it's not. So why do they call it a loan? Because if they call it a loan, they can impose loan conditions. And what are the loan conditions that we impose on? Number one, an extreme austerity program, so that if you're poor in Ukraine, you're going to be poor forever. Number two, most important, Ukraine has to put all of its government-owned assets up for sale to multinational corporations, including all of its agricultural land, the biggest single asset in Europe. In Ukraine, there's been 1,000 years of war fought over that land. It's the richest farmland in the world. It's the breadbasket of Europe. 500,000 kids almost, Ukrainian kids, have died to keep that land as part of Ukraine. They almost certainly didn't know about this loan condition. They've already sold 30% of it. The buyers were DuPont, Cargill, and Monsanto. Who do you think owns all of those companies? Yeah, BlackRock. And then in December, President Biden gave out the contract to rebuild Ukraine. And who do you think got that contract? BlackRock. So they're doing this right in front of us. They don't even care that we know anymore, because they know that they can get away with it. And how do they know that? Because they have a strategy. And that strategy is an old strategy, which is they keep us at war with each other. They keep us hating on each other. They keep the Republicans and Democrats fighting each other, and black against white, and all these divisions that they sow.
Keeping you informed. This is Last Call with BJ Edwards.
Folks, you need to tell your family, friends, and associates about this podcast. You really do. We're probably, maybe 888,000 viewers short of what we need to be. You are not going to get what you're getting today anywhere else. For example, on Thanksgiving, coming up Thursday, I had two choices for the show. Jeff Morgan, which we heard in the first hour, and may join us in the second hour, and the McNeeses from Ohio. And God blessed us with the ability to be able to talk to Jeff and the McNeeses. As goes the family, so goes the nation, folks. We have turned over the control of our children, especially, in our marriages, to the government. They license us the ability to get married. We have to report our children to the government. That is not a best practice, folks. And we have to get away from it. And if things get bad enough, but I continually tell you, I don't want things to get bad, to go worse before we turn things around. I don't want our children to go through the pain they're going through. I don't want marriages to go through the pain they're going to go through. We don't have to do this. And we're trying to bring people to you that are change agents. I want to bring us back to where it was before. Bring the McNeeses on, if you would, Mr. Anderson. Hey, Mike and Elizabeth, how you doing this morning?
Hello, how are you?
Well, blessed, sir. Blessed. And thanks very much for helping us out this morning. It's very much appreciated. You both of you have been involved with Ohio, but it's a national issue as well. And I want to get into, Elizabeth sent me an email the other day. I didn't realize this was going on in the state of Ohio. I know it was bad, but basically what has happened, folks, is we're trying to take the complete control of marriage and children away from parents, away from families, and just turn everything over to the government, because they know what's best for you. They're not, when you see the family tree in America today, It's no longer. Yeah, the government's up there at the top. They're the top of the family tree. Well, they want to be at the top of the family tree. Anyway, Elizabeth or Mike, what is going on in the state of Ohio? And I think the bill, hang on a second, I got around here. Senate Bill 325, the Judges Family Court Reform Bill. What is that?
It sounds crazy and ridiculous, but the judges in Ohio have actually teamed up with the Bar Association, and they've written a bill for family court reform in Ohio. So the judges have written a bill that essentially gives themselves more power and control over families, and they actually authored the bill. And I probably should go back a little bit. So I've been working for 3 years at the State House trying to get family court reform introduced in Ohio. We have had 2 bills that were written by the people that did get introduced. We had House Bill 508 in last GA, and currently we have House Bill 14 in this GA, which is about to end at the end of the year. And both of those bills were completely stalled in committee because of the efforts of the judges and the Bar Association opposing us and really working hard behind the scenes to sabotage our efforts. They informed us in the interested parties meetings behind closed doors 2 years ago that they had a bill that they wrote, and they have been working really hard to get their bill introduced as a response to our people's bill. So we've known it was coming for a couple of years, and they actually did it. So just 2 weeks ago, Senate Bill 325 was introduced. It's being marketed as a child-centric family court reform bill, but there's nothing child-centric about it because it essentially takes parental rights completely out of the equation when we're talking about custody of children in Ohio. And when families come into family court, if this bill were to pass, courts have even more power. They actually put in their bill that they would have complete discretion, also interpreted as absolute discretion, to decide what happens to these children. So we're taking the power and the rights of parents, a fundamental right, by the way. I mean, SCOTUS has ruled time and time again that parents have a fundamental constitutional right to the care and custody of their children. But what's happening, and what this bill would make even worse, is that courts have the power to take children from fit and loving parents and reallocate those rights as they see fit. So SB 325 is essentially solidifying the way things are already working and making them 10 times worse because they're giving themselves the power to overrule parents. Even if parents are coming into court with an agreement, they still are giving themselves that power. So basically any child that goes through family court becomes a ward of the state.
It removes the word parental rights from the Ohio Revised Code?
Yes. So parental rights is throughout the Ohio Revised Code. What their bill is 400 pages long. And one of the main things it does, besides giving themselves complete discretion, which is absurd because a big part of the problem we have right now is too much discretion. Courts have too much opportunity to impose their own personal worldviews and beliefs on how children should be raised. That's already a problem. So they're giving themselves more discretion. So yeah, that's the solution to a problem isn't to create more of that. But also they literally cross out the words parental rights from Ohio custody law and replace it with the words parental responsibilities. So they're basically saying access to your child, being able to make parenting decisions for your child, having the care and custody of your child, that's not a right anymore. That is a parental responsibility. So when you're coming into court, we're not taking away your rights. We're just reallocating your responsibilities in a way that we feel is best for your child. And they've never met your child, by the way.
Yeah. No fault parenting here. Mike, what is shared parenting plans? What are those?
A shared parenting plan. Well, it's a little different in Ohio. because they use the term shared parenting plan anytime a court authorizes a decree for two parents who are divorcing or splitting up. So a shared parenting plan can really mean one parent gets the children all the time. So it doesn't, the shared part absolutely has no meaning whatsoever. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's just a term. So, but the way that we wanted it to work with House Bill 14 and House Bill 508 that Elizabeth wrote and helped introduce is to create an equal shared parenting plan as a standard. When a mom and a dad come to court to separate or divorce, you start off at 50-50 equal shared custody and equal shared parental rights and responsibilities. And, we think that's the way it should be. There are a few states doing that already. They're having good success with it. Our bill is even stronger than what a lot of those states are working with right now that have equal shared parenting laws in place. And that's really given the Bar Association and the judges a big reason to fight us and come at us and ultimately write their own legislation. And BJ, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the separation of powers doctrine in the Constitution, but it's unconstitutional for a judge to write a bill and act as a legislature, and even more unconstitutional for them to write their own laws for their own courtrooms. So we've got a big problem, and I think the bar feels very empowered, and the bar and the judges feel very empowered to come at us because we have a good bill. They're stopping our progress, and now they're trying to reverse it.
Yeah, and I would say they are not hiding their efforts at this point. They have been quoted in news articles about their stance against our legislative efforts, and judges are leaving their bench to come to the state house and testify against a bill for reform written by the people. And it's not just our bill. So the problem we have in Ohio, this is a very specific bill that, has to do with custody law in Ohio, which does impact a lot of Ohioans, obviously. But judges are doing this across the board for all kinds of bills. They're coming to the state house and they're testifying for and against bills, which is complete meddling in the legislative process. So one thing we've learned is that our legislators here in Ohio, a vast majority of them, recognize how much power and authority the judges and the Bar Association have, and they will not take a stand against them because they know they hold all of the power. And as an Ohioan, that is terrifying to me that our elected officials are too scared to challenge these people and say, get out of here. Judge, you are a judge. Why are you here in committee testifying for or against a bill? Judge, why are you writing bills? They're afraid to do that. And it's scary. It is scary how much power the Bar Association and the judges have in Ohio.
We've 400-page bill. You sent the link for that to me. I started going through that thing and I went, oh, well, good Lord. How much time did you and Mike spend just finding out what was in the bill? And is this purposeful? If it's just pass it and then we'll figure out how it works later, right? Is that the idea here?
So there is a lot of background to this bill, actually. I've had a copy of this bill for 2 years. So my team, my legislative team, and I spent time 2 years ago when we first got their draft going through it. So we analyzed this thing 2 years ago. So I am super familiar with it just because I've had it in my possession so long. And the judges gave it to me themselves too, by the way. That's how proud of themselves they are that they shared that with us 2 years ago. But one thing we have to understand with the judges is that they were actually invited into the legislature by legislators. So 20 years ago, well, I'll back up a bit further. 30 years ago, Ohio changed our laws to have the best interest of the child standard into our law. So that basically means when courts are making these decisions, they have to consider what is in the best interest of the child. And they do that by considering factors. Okay. That's where the law stops on that. So courts have to look at a list of factors and then make a decision based on what they feel is best. Okay. So that's very subjective, but they do have a list of factors to consider. Now, 10 years later, right around 1998, 99, they realized that that's not enough. Courts are still biased. When you look at the census data and you look at the Child Support Enforcement Agency data, you see that things are still very lopsided. Dads, a majority of the time, are paying child support as a non-custodial parent, for instance. So things are not shaking out very evenly, which you would expect if things were fair, right? That there would be some sort of consensus. Also, courts have to, under current law, create their own local standards for parenting time. So, there's the issue of decision making or parental rights over your child. And then there's also a separate issue of time. How is the child's time going to be allotted between parents? Each county in Ohio has to come up with their own standard. And that standard is what they apply when parents can't agree. They say, this is our default position if you guys can't agree. It also guides parents when they are trying to come to an agreement, right? Well, if we, this is what they're going to give us. So it's crazy because all 88 counties have different standards. So you might live in Ashtabula County and your county standard is 50-50. That's where the court is going to start. Or you might, live down the
street.
Yeah, across county lines in the next county over where their default is every other weekend. So we're not even seeing a consistency with how courts are choosing to apply a standard. There is no standard in the state of Ohio.
And how are both of those in the best interest of children?
Right. Yeah. Why are kids in this county? It's best that their parents share equally. In this county, it's best for them that they only see their dad typically every other weekend.
Yeah, which exposes basically what we're talking about here, the foolishness of it. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, I'm going to want to know what got you involved in this, but I also want to know about what you're trying to propose the state of Ohio to do as versus what might happen. I won't say probably, but what might happen. Mr. Anderson, take us to break, and we'll come back with the McNeeses.
We tend to forget the rights of a child. I mean, all the focus is on the mom and the dad. And when we don't see the importance of a child, the results are ever so sad. Let's first look at the husband-wife relationship. I mean, it's glorious when we follow God's plan. And the man is to be a godly leader, leading humbly, not making demands. And as the wife is cherished by her husband, her love for him will only grow. And each are growing in their love for the other. But there's a deeper love they'll come to know. When they are blessed with their first child, they develop a different kind of love. And it's a love that's just hard to explain. I mean, no doubt it comes from above. And this child, while helpless, is so powerful. Without speaking, they are a great teacher, teaching their parents about the love of God, changing lives more than a sermon from the preacher. This child can make changes in the dad, changes that dad had been unwilling to make. And mom is also making some changes. They do it for the child's sake. We don't give the children the respect that they're due, since they influence the family's direction. They teach lessons only they can teach. They have the power to make family corrections. This influence does not just start at birth. Change begins in the mom at conception. Even before she knows she's with a child, God has made the gender selection. And God has a plan for this child at conception. Why is it so hard for us to see the importance of our God-blessed children and what God wants this child to be?
just getting into the idea of divorce is just, and I've said it earlier in the program, I see it as child abuse, and it should be not happening at all. But let's just say in extreme cases, yes, okay, but that isn't where we are in America today. It's like expected. We expect you, if you're going to get married, you can expect to get divorced, and your children to grow up without two parents. And I know very personally of a situation where there was a divorce, and this went way back into the 80s and 90s period, and the judge let the husband pay for the child, and the husband got to see the child once every 2 weeks for a few hours. And when the child was picked up by the husband, ex-husband, they'd be crying, they'd be upset, and the after a few hours, everything would be okay, and then the ex-husband would take the child back to the ex-wife, and then 5 minutes later, he'd get a call from the ex-wife wondering why the child was crying again. I mean, what we do as a society through our courts, and look at this is our problem, not necessarily it's what we've allowed our government to do. It's still we the people, and folks like the McNeeses and Jeff Morgan and others who are fighting on our behalf. They're fighting on behalf of children, for crying out loud, and they have to beg us to help them. And we wonder why things aren't working out. Mike Elizabeth, come on back in, please. Save me here.
Well, you were going to ask us about how we kind of got involved in this.
Yeah.
We were both married before we found each other to other people, and that obviously means we went through divorces. She had 3 kids from her previous marriage, and I also had 3 kids from my previous marriage, and we had very different experiences when we went through the divorce. The way I look back on it now is I actually feel pretty lucky, even though I also got screwed. The standard laws where we live is I should only get my kids 4 days a month. I actually get them like 8. So, which is still awful. It's horrible. And I feel awful for my kids, but I did do better than the average. Elizabeth's experience was almost worse because her and her ex, obviously they weren't getting along, but their divorce, I think, was pretty peaceful. And they made it known to each other that they want to split up the kids or to split up their time and responsibilities with the kids 50-50. But when she went to go hire an attorney just to, make this all, codified and have the attorney be the one to write the paperwork, that attorney kept pressuring Elizabeth. Hey, did you ever experience any abuse? Are you sure you didn't experience any abuse? Because there are a lot of reasons and a lot of perks you can get by being a victim of domestic violence, which you only need an allegation to consider yourself a victim of domestic violence. And then, there's a whole chain reaction of the Bar Association and the Violence Against Women Act that really ups the ante in the divorce and also weaponizes the parents against each other. And wow, you talk about trauma for the kids. I mean, I'm glad Elizabeth and her ex were able to stay peaceful through that. My experience was very different when allegations were made and, splitting up the kids unequally for me was devastating. And, like you said, kids crying when they got in my car.
Yep.
That happened almost every time for a couple of years. And now it's getting better. But yeah, it breaks my heart, the trauma that the kids have to go through because of that. And, now looking back on it, knowing that the Bar Association and the judges, how much money they're able to accrue through law fees and attorney fees and court fees, they're abusing our children, trafficking our children for profit.
Interesting. Yeah, makes sense. I'm gonna Jeff. If you want to come in, I'll bring Jeff in. Maybe he's got a few comments. I think you all. I think you all know each other.
We like Jeff.
Yeah, Mike and Elizabeth came down to Texas on a couple of occasions. They showed the movie down here, We the Parents. I really wish that would have had hundreds of thousands of views. I feel bad every time. I think you're around 20,000. I'm like, man, they put so much time and effort and sweat into it, and this should be a movie that everybody who's going through this stuff would watch. It should have gone viral like crazy. And I just am so sorry on that part of it. But thank you so much for everything that you've done. I enjoy always hearing from you and Elizabeth. And I know that just your legislative stuff. I know that you've been keeping track of that stuff. It's appalling that you have judges that are making laws. And Mike, what you said, that is a huge, huge issue. I almost think that to some degree that they have betrayed their constitutional duties, and maybe at this point you should actually try to prosecute them for criminal activities. And that's my opinion, because the only thing is the others, they keep on accruing power to themselves, and we need to address them head on. This is my opinion. You guys do whatever you want to with it.
Totally agree.
But I mean, that's, as you know, like with the court watching down here, we decided that the only way that we could start to fight back, you cannot always play defense, you must play offense. And you put them on public notice. Shame still works in our society, to some degree anyway. Some people act without shame. But, it was amazing how many times I was told, now I don't know this for a fact, but I was told because of some of the things that we did, that even the Texas Supreme Court was talking about some of the issues that we raised. And I know we had judges that were moved to different counties, and we had attorneys that practically were crying. I think that one may not be practicing anymore. But the thing was, say, hey, you do the right thing, you're fine. You do the wrong thing, we're going to come after you. And, down here, they call me the Godfather, right? I don't know why exactly, but, people, I just say, hey, we're just here to protect people, help families. So don't cross us, do the right thing, you're good. But I mean, we obviously can't do that all the time. And but I just thank you guys for what you did. The movie was great. Again, I wish I would have had so many more views and people would have used it more. Maybe it still will in the future. But thank you so much for everything you guys have done.
Mike and Elizabeth, can we still get to the movie? And if so, how do we do that?
Yeah, it's on YouTube still. We the Parents movie on YouTube.
Okay, I tried to search for that and couldn't get into it before the show yesterday. It kept bringing me to a screen, assuming that I was AI, and I had to hit something, but it didn't work. It's We the Parents movie, and yeah, that's what I searched for, and I could not get to it.
Okay, interesting.
And now, I'm a technological caveman, so we have to take that into consideration.
I think Mike's going to send you the link, but you should be able to find it. You want to look for the one from 2024. There was some Parents' Rights California thing that was like 2013, a little video somebody made that gave that same title. But you're going to want to look for the actual documentary in 2024. But yeah, it's coming up for us. Okay. So it's out there. We're hovering just over 20,000 views. The problem is nobody wants to talk about family courts, because if you're going through it, you're usually pretty loud and you're traumatized with what you're experiencing.
Sure. Yeah.
And right now, and people around you don't want to hear it. It makes people feel awkward to talk about it. People don't like to talk about divorce. They don't like to talk about family courts at all. And they just want to say, oh, every case is different, and want to justify doing nothing. And I think it's because it is an uncomfortable situation. It's an uncomfortable conversation, and people don't like talking about it, and it sucks, but that's the way it is. And legislators don't want to talk about it either. It's like a hot potato, because everyone recognizes that it's a problem and the way things are working is not working. But nobody wants to do anything because it's such a controversial topic.
It's painful. I mean, you're being rejected. one party, the other, or both are being rejected. And rejection is a very traumatic experience. I tell you what, we're going to go ahead and take a break. And when we come back, I've got the link for the We the Parents movie, I think, up there. It's the one that Mike sent. And I want to talk about how we can help you specifically in Ohio, what we can do as an Ohio resident, as a voter, perhaps, with our representatives. Just let us know. Mr. Anderson, take us to break, please.
Last Call with BJ Edwards. Real talk about real life.
We are back with Mike and Elizabeth McNees. Folks, this SB 325, will this be a different one the first of the year? Will this be under a different label?
Yeah, they'll have to reintroduce it in the beginning of the year if they don't manage to squeeze it through in the next couple of weeks. So that's a long shot. I wouldn't say it's out of the realm of possibility because all leadership in the Senate and in that committee are attorneys who are loyal to the bar. So it's a possibility that they could get it through anyway. But it's likely that they'll have to reintroduce it at the beginning of the year.
Well, I'm not going to assume that. And I think we need to start now anyway. If it's kind of like waiting on President Trump. We'll sit back, have our favorite adult beverage, and watch him take care of things, or go back to our caves and start singing Kumbaya and get in touch with our God feelings and let him out there on an island. We can't do that. We have at best, or maybe at worst, an opportunity with less resistance than we had for the past 4 years, and look at it in those manners. But we, the people, have to do this. If we don't bark, if we don't apply pressure, if we don't apply heat, then we get what we get, and take a look at where we are. So let's just make the assumptive that this needs to start. It needs to start right now. Waving the magic wand, residents in the state of Ohio, Mike, Elizabeth, what do we need to start doing? Well, not today, but Monday. What would we need to do?
Well, I think you're right that, we can't wait on President Trump to get in there on January 20th. But it feels like the climate is changing right now, which I think is a good thing, even if it just means people are more aware of corruption or potential corruption. Accusing the government of being corrupt is not a shock anymore. We know they are. They're doing this right in front of our faces. They feel no shame for the corruption, for the evil that they're doing. So I'm thankful that the climate is changing. I think that's going to encourage us to apply more pressure. And like Jeff Morgan was saying, that, we have to be on the offensive, and we've got a few things we're working on in that regard. But in the spirit of support, especially for the people here in Ohio, is you guys got to get to know your representatives.
Okay.
They are working with each other and not with us, the people. And it's very clear that everybody in the legislature is just doing each other favors. They're trying to make certain people happy so they can get certain committee positions or leadership roles. And it's just a big political game. So we need to be keeping an eye on them, and be unwilling to trust in our representatives, because that's our duty, is to keep them accountable. Meet them, write them often, call them, get FaceTime with your representatives, and let them know how you feel on issues. Document how you are telling them that you are feeling on issues. And then when they don't represent you, vote them out and be very loud about it.
We can't assume that they think they know what we want, what we need. We can't think that. They're a job of a politician. We're in a public opinion war, folks. We are in a public opinion war. The job of a politician, keep that in mind, is to get elected and to stay elected. So they have to appeal to the public. And unfortunately, we have a news media, a press that only gives one. If you go to court and you only have like no fault court, if you will, in public opinion, you only have one side of the equation. That's all you get is one side. You make decisions based on information. If you only have this piece of information, then what kind of a decision are you going to make? You're going to make a decision based upon that. We need to make sure that our representatives understand what Mike and Elizabeth are doing, understand what the Jeff Morgans of the world are doing, or the BJ Edwards, or the Coach Dave Light, whatever. They need to understand that there are other people out there that have opinions that don't agree with what the liberal progressive press puts out, what politicians put out, what they think they have to put out because of what the press says. And what Mike said, get to know do you even know who your representative is? Start with that, okay? And representatives have friends that are representatives. I have right now a representative that I go to church with, but he's not in my district, but I know him. I know the senator. I've met the senator. I know my representative, and I know another representative is next door to that representative. So my comments are going to be to all four of those people. And then as an ex-headhunter, I'm going to say to them, who else do you know that I should be talking with that needs to know what's going on here, that needs to be connected with the McNeeses? By the way, is there a contact point for you all? The best contact point for the McNeeses?
Yeah, sure. So legislatively, I work right now with National Parents Organization, it's an organization that's very child focused on the best interest of children related to shared parenting. So we really encourage and equip legislators with the research, because there is over 40 years of research that supports the idea that children need both parents in their lives. And so National Parents Organization is kind of spearheading that, and I'm chair of Ohio. So my contact information, though, my email through the NPO would be the easiest way, especially legislatively, if you want to get hold of me. It's Elizabeth McNees at sharedparenting.org. I'm pretty quick to respond to emails for sure. We need people. We need bodies, because I'm pounding the pavement, and I have a handful of really good parents who are very dedicated, and they definitely make the phone calls and they set the appointments, and they're meeting with legislators and helping out in the effort. But there's a lot of people who say they want to help and they do nothing. Like what we're up against are full-time paid lobbyists. Okay. These people walk the halls all day, every day at the State House and represent the interests of the judges and represent the interests of the Bar Association. We, the people, cannot stand up against that without numbers. Okay. It can't just be me and my guys. Like we really, really, really need people to get loud and bring attention to this, because a lot of our legislators, even though they're terrified of going against the judges and the attorneys, they know that this is what their constituents want. They feel powerless too. Like I can't tell you how many meetings I've been in where they say, I know it's not right. I can't believe they have so much power, but they do.
We need to stop. We need to stop complaining. Like I complain about the bar all the time, but that's not me really just whining about it. That's a motivator for us that we know how big the Goliath is that we're up against, and we're not afraid of it. We're still going to take it on. And one of the most attractive things about my wife is her unwillingness to trust the government. And she texted me the other day and said, maybe we should incorporate if we're going to go after the government. And that just melted my heart.
Yeah. Do I have the address right there, Elizabeth?
Yeah, that would be great. I mean, okay. if people really don't know what to do, I can give you the phone numbers you need to call or whatever. But we do need people to actually do something, because again, these lobbyists are paid a lot of money and that is their job. That is their job. It was funny recently in a podcast interview with Trump right before the election, they were talking about lobbyists because everyone knows big pharma, and
it was on the Theo Von podcast.
Yeah. Everybody knows big pharma. They know, big ag, all these lobbying organizations. Nobody, unless you're actually pounding the pavement at the State House or, in Washington, D.C., the biggest lobbyist group, and Trump said this, and I almost fainted because he said out loud what I have always known, is that the biggest lobbying group is the lawyers. They are bigger than pharma. They are bigger than ag. They are bigger than energy. The lawyers are the biggest lobbying group. So if we the people don't unite, oh my God.
The Bar Association they have a monopoly on the law because they're the experts on the law. They represent folks on the law. They write the law in the legislature. And now they're trying to have judges who should be interpreting the law, writing their own laws as well. So they really, I'm wondering if we have an antitrust issue with the Bar Association because they definitely have a monopoly.
Interesting. Never thought of it in those terms. And I didn't pay attention to Donald Trump when he said that. Just went over my head because of the big pharma but you know what? It makes sense. But playing devil's advocate, I mean, if you want somebody that's going to make a law, don't you want a lawyer to do it? Come on.
Oh, I love that. Can I give you my response to that?
Please go for it.
I have heard that so many times because I authored our parenting bills. Like, I've gotten to know the law in Ohio very well, like intimately, like I can quote it, and I will get in these meetings with judges and they don't even know the law. So I'll mention the law and quote the law, and they don't even think I'm telling the truth because they don't even know the law. However, when you're talking about a civil court, and family court is a civil court, right? It's not criminal court. You don't have your constitutional rights. So you don't get the right to an attorney. You don't have the right to plead the fifth. You don't have your constitutional rights really protected through due process in civil courts and family courts, especially. That means a lot of parents are representing themselves. So they're going into court, wanting to stay in their child's life and wanting to be that parent that they've always been. And their constitutional right to parent is up for grabs, right? But they can't afford an attorney a lot of times, or it's gone on so long that they're forced to represent themselves. So to answer your question, do you want an attorney writing law? Well, not when a vast majority of people entering that court are self-representing. They're not attorneys. So the only people I feel that can properly write a law that the average person can understand is an average person, because lawyers legalese stuff, they make things more complicated. They, make it so only a professional can interpret and apply it. Well, then you got to hire the professional, right? But most people can't afford that. And so you're representing yourself. So I think laws should be written by the people for the people in a very practical way, because parents are representing themselves a lot of times.
When it comes to parenting, who should know best how to be a parent?
Well, judge, obviously, that's never met your children.
And the same thing might apply to education.
Yes,
absolutely.
Yes.
Which is creating a lot of our problems, by the way, but that's yet another subject. We'll get into that.
Right. But it's related. It's related because we know that courts have been attacking our families through family court for decades. Okay. Yep. Now they're getting so bold that they're attacking, our parenting rights to make decisions for our children in the school and out in the world, so they are connected, because I think it started when we gave the government the authority to make these decisions for our children when no crime has been committed. There's never been a finding that you were unfit. Okay. They're taking kids away from parents who were never found to be unfit. Once we allowed that in family court, that's where they open the door to all the other ways that they can challenge a parent's right to the care and custody of their own child.
Yeah. I opened the show today talking about an event in Georgia where a mother, 10-year-old child, is decided to take off and walk down the road. And she was promptly arrested, cuffed, and thrown in jail. And that's basically kind of where we're headed. That sort of thing where, we know best, and you obviously can't do a good job. So we're going to throw you in court and pay the fines. Jeff Morgan, what do you want, brother?
No, I was listening to that. I remember this was about 5 or 6 years ago. I was driving through, and I'm pretty sure it was Tennessee. I was on the highway, so I couldn't stop and take a picture of the billboard. But there was a billboard out there, and it was an attorney who was advertising. Evidently left the legislature or got voted out or something, but he was advertising. Wouldn't you like to have an attorney who actually knows the law because he wrote the law? He knows everything about the law. And what you're saying is absolutely correct. In fact, I've sat beside attorneys in court while I was court watching that have said, this judge does not know the law. But the attorneys won't say anything because if they dare contradict the judge, they will lose going forward. And I mean, this is well known. I remember one attorney that I met up in Collin County courts, and he was telling me his story. And I asked, he said, but don't tell anybody this because I'll never win again. But he was talking about how he had been a police officer, and then he had to start writing tickets to fill up his quota. And he said, I couldn't sleep with my conscience. So he decided to become a lawyer. And then he went through a divorce. And then somebody said to him, you got really slaughtered in your divorce, but why don't you become a family law attorney? Because you can make a lot of money this way. And then he did that. And then he said, but then my conscience bothered me. He said, I'm a Christian. My conscience bothered me. So he became like a criminal defense attorney. He said, I make less money, but I actually can sleep at night. But that's how corrupt this whole industry is. And we cannot pretend that these people are upstanding citizens. I would go so far as to say that if you're a family law attorney, we need to, if you're at a church, we need to examine you. You should not be in a leadership position, and maybe you should be rebuked. And our judges that are Christian judges that do things, I think that, so we can't touch them from a political point of view. I think the churches should kick them out. I mean, we know judges that do some of this stuff. And I'm like, and I want to see the churches get a backbone, because the biggest issue is if the church got a backbone and started to address these issues the way that it should, there is the separation of church and state, supposedly. We can tell the state stay out of our church business.
Amen. Amen. Mike, Elizabeth, last word, because we got to put the Thanksgiving turkey in the oven in the last 15 minutes. Go ahead. And thanks, Jeff.
So thanks, BJ.
Well, I would say if you're in Ohio, contact Senator Gavarone. She's a Republican sponsor of the judge's bill. Tell her no. Tell her to stop it.
She's also a family law attorney.
She's also a family law attorney. She just got elected to be the floor leader, floor leader in the Senate next GA. So she's got power. Tell her no, withdraw that bill and don't reintroduce it. Senator Hicks Hudson is, as a Democrat, her co-sponsor of that same bill. So we've got to try and kill this bill and tell them the people do not want this bill. We do not want a bill written by the judges that was written for the judges. This is not a child-centric bill. This is a judge-centric bill. So that would be my biggest message to everyone is do your research, reach out to your legislators, and let them know we will not tolerate judges writing bills that give them more power.
And I think we're, like I said before, we're in a good climate coming up, and I'm hopeful that things are going to change, and some of the corruption is not only going to be shed some light on that, but also start to turn some stuff around. But we still can't trust Donald Trump. We can't trust RFK or Vivek or Elon or any of them. We need to trust in God, trust in families, trust in ourselves, and know what our rights are, and keep these people on the hook for representing us, because they've gotten so comfortable in the last 50, 60 years of just kind of backdoor handshakes and closed door meetings and things like that. So we need to take advantage of this climate and let them know that we're watching them.
Shine a light.
That's what I'm talking about.
Elizabeth and Mike McNees, thank you very much. Jeff Morgan, thank you. We're going to put the Thanksgiving turkey in the oven here early. I can't tell you how much I appreciate what you're doing, and I am going to call those two those two representatives that you talked about. But I'm going to call them as the national director of the Natural Family Foundation and tell them, look, I couldn't get through all this. What does this mean to the family? How does this benefit the family? And then let them hang themselves. Okay. Again, thank you very much. Mr. Anderson, if you take us to break, and I think we got a couple ovens we got to throw the turkey in here, right? Or wrong.
Keeping you informed. This is Last Call with BJ Edwards.
Wow.
In the name of God, amen.
We, whose names are underwritten.
The loyal subjects of our dread sovereign Lord, King James.
By the grace of God, of Great Britain, France, and Ireland King.
Defender of the faith, having undertaken, for the glory of God, an advancement of the Christian faith.
In honor of our King and country, a voyage to plant the first colony in the northern parts of Virginia.
Do by these presents, solemnly and mutually in the presence of God and one of another.
Covenant and combine ourselves together into a silver-bodied polity.
For our better ordering and preservation and furtherance of the ends aforesaid.
And by virtue hereof to enact, constitute, and frame such just and equal laws, ordinance, acts, constitutions, and offices from time to time.
As shall be thought most meet and convenient for the general good of the colony, unto which we promise all due submission and obedience.
In witness whereof we have hereunder subscribed our names at Cape Cod, the 11th of November.
In the year of the reign of our sovereign Lord, King James of England, France, and Ireland the 18th, and of Scotland the 54th.
In the year of our Lord, 1620.
Thanksgiving, wow. Time to get together with families and remind each other that you are a family. I was thinking about brothers and sisters and how did they become so familiar with each other, so protective of each other for the most part, and mothers and fathers. We need to be reminded of that, and we need to remind others of that this coming Thanksgiving. It's an opportunity to draw the family closer together. We're not going to invite any politicians, any strange politicians to us, to our Thanksgiving get-togethers. Family members. We need to be reminded that they are family members and what family means. I mentioned early on that a mother or father would give their lives for the child. And what would you do for your brother or sister? I can remember when I was growing up, my older sister, I was delivering papers and got accidentally hit by a car, got clipped by a car. And I was okay, but when my sister heard about it, she got on her bike and she went 3 miles to come make sure I was okay. That's what the family's about. That's what we need. Remember those instances. What you did for a child, what you did for a brother or sister. That's so critically important. That is the strength of any civilization. If you go back through time and you take a look at civilizations, be it Rome, Greece, the great civilizations, and what happened to them when they forgot about the family, about its importance in society, about its construction. One man, one woman, lifelong, committed, monogamous relationship. Anything that attacks that is a crack on the foundation of any and all civilizations. Anything that attacks that, be it divorce, abuse, internal or government. The family is the first institution. God created 3 of them, family, church, state. But it was the first institution that God created for the benefit of man. And it wasn't by a flip of a coin. He knew what he was doing because he knew that was the base. And part of that is because the relationship that you have. You're growing up in a family. You're around these people all your life, most of your life. In general, there are exceptions, okay? There are exceptions. And what happens with those exceptions? A lot of them end up in prison. When you don't have that sound, we have an internal need. We have an internal need for a mother and a father. And we have a special relationship with a brother and sister. Aunts, uncles, grandparents. Oh, wow. That is, when you become a grandparent, that's an experience. There's a loving experience there with your grandchildren that you just cannot explain to somebody. You have to experience it. But be reminded of that during these holidays, not your political differences from strangers, opinions that they have, but be reminded of you're part of a family. Family means something. And I think Thanksgiving might be a good time to just start rebuilding those relationships. See it as an opportunity, not to get your point across. And the only point you need to get across is how much you love that son or daughters or mother and father, and how special that relationship is. And maybe you'll start having get-togethers once a week with the family at the table. Should be nightly, but at least once a week. Our civilization, the United States of America, depends on how we take care of the family. Or if we don't take care of it. That is where our strength is. That's where our strength lies. Look, you can make sure the elections are honest, which they should be, and all the other specialties that we deal in. But if you fix all them and the family's still broken, your foundation, what do you got? As goes the family, so goes the church. As goes the church, so goes the nation.
We're all familiar with the story of the first Thanksgiving when the Pilgrims invited local Native Americans to share a meal with them. But we bet you didn't know Thanksgiving didn't become an annual tradition until more than 200 years later. That first Thanksgiving in 1621 wasn't just one big meal. It was a 3-day festival of eating, hunting, and other entertainments in honor of the Pilgrims' first successful harvest. The Indians killed 5 deer as gifts for the colonists, so venison was definitely on the first Thanksgiving menu. But we bet you didn't know that turkey was not. They also didn't have pumpkin pie or potatoes, which hadn't been introduced to New England yet. And while they may have eaten cranberries, they would have been served plain, not in a sauce or relish. The Pilgrims didn't plan on starting a Thanksgiving tradition. In fact, they didn't repeat the November celebration in subsequent years. In 1789, President George Washington announced the first ever national Thanksgiving holiday, which took place on Thursday, November 26th. But it didn't become an annual tradition nationwide until the 19th century. That's when an American writer named Sarah Josepha Hale, most famous for writing the nursery rhyme Mary Had a Little Lamb, was inspired by a diary of pilgrim life to recreate that first Thanksgiving feast. Beginning in 1827, Hale waged a nearly 30-year campaign to make Thanksgiving a national holiday. She also published recipes for pumpkin pie, turkey, and stuffing that probably didn't appear on the Pilgrims' plates, but would become the staples of modern Thanksgiving meals. In 1863, in the midst of the Civil War, President Abraham Lincoln announced that the nation would celebrate Thanksgiving every year on the final Thursday in November. But did you know, in 1939, President Franklin D. Roosevelt decided to move the holiday up a week to give Depression-era retailers more time to make money during the pre-Christmas shopping season. The move was widely criticized, and in 1941, FDR signed a bill fixing Thanksgiving on the fourth Thursday in November, where it stays today. One of the quirkiest Thanksgiving traditions began in 1989 when President George H.W. Bush granted the first official pardon to a turkey. Every November since then, the current Oval Office occupant has given a reprieve to 1 or 2 turkeys, sending them into retirement on a farm rather than to a dinner table. Though it only began in the late 20th century, the story has become one of the more unusual chapters in the long history of Thanksgiving traditions.
Join us next week for Last Call with BJ Edwards.